And we are back. Our next speaker is Mr. Mike Fong, who spent 3.5 years as an analytics architect at Tesco, which, if you're not in the UK, you need to know is one of the world's largest retailers of consumer goods and food and fashion. And that mute button is going to kill me, I tell you. But for the past 6 years, he has been at ObservePoint, where he is now senior consultant and solutions engineer. Mike here is to introduce us to ObservePoint's privacy compliance offering. So Mike, welcome to Marketing Analytics Summit.
Thank you very much, Jim. So yeah, it's great to be here. I'm following from a great session by Carol. So I guess just a bit about myself. So my name's Mike. As Jim mentioned, I've been on ObservePoint for a while. And before that, I was in charge of setting up the Adobe stack on Tesco using, back then it was DTM. We didn't have launch then. But in the time, so basically in my career of about 10 years, we've basically seen a situation where sort of privacy laws have gone from being an idea to being a tick box exercise a few years ago. To actually genuinely being enforced. And so it's been interesting starting my career right at the start when cookie banners first appeared and when you would always just ignore them on a website and they were just an annoyance to the point where you didn't notice them because they've been around for so long. And now where you got £1 million and $1 million fines just flying around everywhere. And actually, before I go any further, I must apologize for my background. I'm actually in my mum's storage room. So this is not one of the prettier virtual backgrounds, but unfortunately, I haven't got a virtual background. So yeah, we've got the owl from Harry Potter, actually. And I haven't seen the films or read the books. I don't actually know what the owl's called, so I'm very sorry. But back on topic. So we've seen a situation where GDPR has really, it's in effect now. The fines are flying. There's been a bit of a truce because of COVID, but I'm pretty sure that once COVID dies down, those fines will be flying all over again. So this image I want to show you is just an idea of the geographical range of data privacy regulations at the moment. So according to a report published by Gartner last September, so which means, my stats are already out of date. But back then, about 10% of the world was protected under some kind of data privacy regulation. And we're broadly talking about, basically back then, Europe and California, basically. The report also predicts this number rising to 65% of the world by 2023. Of course, there'll be delays, there'll be things shifting, but by and large, the number doesn't matter. The fact is that every organization in the world, you're not going to be able to ignore the legal requirements placed upon 2/3 of your market. And that's by 2023. That's 2 years away. So in order to meet these requirements, many digital businesses, website owners are investing in a consent management platform or a CMP. And there are plenty of choice out there, lots of vendors, but it's often the case with these digital things is that no one thinks about checking the quality of their implementations. And I like to draw an analogy with, web dev or app dev, right? It would be insane to spend, $1 million on a development team and not spend some money on a quality assurance testing team. We found that out over the last 20 years when, websites were really bad 20 years ago, and they improved. And a lot of that is thanks to automated testing. So now, in my role at ObservePoint over the last 5.5 years, I've seen the same realization dawn upon digital marketeers. Why is it that every time you implement a new tag or you do a digital transformation project, why is it that the data is always wrong? Why do we spend so much time chasing our own tails, looking at the data and figuring out why there's problems? And the answer is that automated testing generally hasn't even been thought of or planned. So even in the Martech space, many organizations are playing catch up. So I want to help you all look ahead and get ahead of the game and say, actually, we're going to implement a CMP and we're going to think about QA at the same time. Because if you think about QA as an afterthought, you will be 2 or 3 years behind. And guess what? Those fines will be flying. And if right now 10% of the world is protected, in 2 years' time, 65% of the world is going to be protected. Imagine how much exposure your organization has to those large fines. So I'd like to introduce ObservePoint's privacy compliance feature. So this is designed from the ground up, and released very recently in order to help our customers get ahead of the game. And rather than ramming a product down your throats, I thought I'd give you something more useful. This is a simple checklist. It's product agnostic. It's layman's terms. We know that when it comes to a new, almost a new market or a new skill set, it's going to need to be built up from people, people who are new to the space. So even a layman's simple reading of the GDPR should logically lead you to look at these 6 simple requirements. So firstly, think about just basically, do you or anybody in your organization know what is the entire Martech stack on your website? This is 101. It's taken an inventory. Imagine a worst case situation where some sensitive information has been accidentally published on your website, say, employees' salaries, or I don't know, some leak from Facebook or something like that. One of the things you need to do is inform the market. You need to tell your data authority, and then you need to trace where the data has gone. Where does that data potentially have gone? So you need to know every single third-party vendor that's on your site. 99% plus of the individuals at the organizations I talked to over the last few years have not been able to provide a list like that. They've not even been able to tell me whose job it is to provide a list like that. So simple preparedness is just know what you're paying for. Often you can actually remove many technologies that are redundant. So let's move on to step 2. So ensuring your Martech is delivered through your tag management system. And the question is why? So consent management platforms generally work by communicating with the tag management system, and then the tag management system will be enabling or disabling the tags. So if you have tags outside of your tag management system, then your consent management platform will have no effect. So third one, this is a really obvious one. So GDPR says that the customer must be granted the option to opt out the moment, opt out of cookies and analytics, the moment they land on your website. It follows logically that your consent management platform must be on every single page that a customer could potentially land on. So rather than having lots of caveats and lots of logic, why not just go the nuclear option and ensure your CMP is on every single page? Simple and effective. So next step, ensure your cookie notice is accurate. So gone are the days where you could have a cookie notice that everyone ignored. As part of GDPR, the old cookie notice laws have been superseded, and now you see many websites will explicitly list out a list of cookies and notify this to their customers. But how do you know that cookie notice has been updated? What's your process for keeping it up to date? And how are you auditing? How are you comparing your list to the truth? ObservePoint and products like ObservePoint, many can give you a cookie inventory by crawling your site across many thousands of pages. Comparing the reality to what you're notifying your customers of is one of the low-hanging fruit and one of the easiest things that you can do. The downside is I spoke to someone yesterday and they told me that they spent literally 5 months checking manually the cookies across all the brands under their group. And I really felt for that person, because if he'd spoken to us 5 months ago, we could have saved him all that heartache, especially since the work he's done is probably out of date by the time that 5 months was up. Nearly at the end, of this list. So number 5, ensuring that your consent preferences are actually respected. I'd say between 30 to 40% of the CMP implementations I inspect do not work properly. The first major flaw is point 3. The CMP isn't on every page. And the second major flaw is that the CMPs that are on every page don't do anything. You'll see later on that it's very easy to misconfigure your CMP. And I do believe that many of you in the audience may have experienced this yourselves. Hopefully, none of you will have experienced that and not know about it. So if you are sleeping safe at night knowing that you've implemented a CMP, I want you to go and check that you've implemented it correctly on every single page. Finally, one of the pillars of GDPR is that personal information must stay within the European Union. Very, very bluntly, you need to know where the data is going. So let's look at how ObservePoint can actually help you with each of the 6. The Martech stack, this is something that ObservePoint has been able to provide for the full 10 years, full 10, 12 years of our history. This very simple screenshot simply lists what technologies were found on the left, which pages or how many pages the text were found on, and how many were missing. So you can do a completion check, but you can also, more importantly, know what technologies you have and whether they're duplicating. So in this example, we've got an organization that's using both Adobe Analytics and Google Analytics. So that's a business decision, but to be aware of that allows you the information to make an informed decision. So let's move on to step 2. We talked about knowing which tags are delivered through your tag management system. So on screen is the tag initiators feature. And this allows you to actually see how tags are related to each other. So on the screen here, we can see a Facebook tag is hard-coded to the page at the top. Below that, we can see 3 Google Tag Manager containers. Below that, we can see Yandex Metrica hard-coded to the page. So there's a lot wrong with this page. Now, what I would say is that this appears to be basically an incomplete implementation. So we're not passing any judgment here, but the feature exists to allow customers to really keep control of piggybacking and hard-coded tags. I'm going to speed up a bit. I know Jim's probably looking at his watch right now. So one of the most important points I mentioned is a CMP on every page. So at the bottom right of my screenshot, you'll see a highlighted stat. And so just for your information, we scanned 500 pages of a website. We found these technologies, but we found OneTrust, the actual CMP itself, was available on less than a half of the pages we scanned. So let that sink in for a moment. You've paid for a CMP license. You've paid someone to implement it correctly, but you are not protected at all. So your bottom line has actually decreased. Things have got worse because of a poor implementation. And this is not a slight at all at the technology. This is definitely an implementation problem rather than a problem with technology. So that the most likely problem here is that the implementation team dived straight into the technicals, and in the planning phase, they didn't ask themselves a simple question: how many pages are on our website? Who's in charge of the CMS? We should talk to that person. That's all it would have taken. Simple mistakes that could have been prevented with an automated QA solution. Moving on, the cookie notice accuracy. So ObservePoint allows you to crawl your website, create an inventory of all your cookies, and actually export the data and do a side-by-side comparison with your notification. Do this on a regular basis, and you can be guaranteed that your notice is up to speed all the time. And then nearly the final one, are the consent preferences actually respected? This is my favorite mistake, because it's when I'm doing sales demos, people's faces drop and their jaws fall to the floor. They're like, oh my God. So you'll see the title of this audit is called Cookies, well, Audit Denied Cookies. So, you can see the third row of this, the third from bottom row, I should say, is actually the OneTrust CMP. So in essence, what this result set tells us is that the CMP is there, but it doesn't do anything. Adobe Analytics is still present. Bing ads, Google Analytics. These are all, this is a flaming black and white obvious violation of GDPR. Of course, it's an unknown website. We'll keep them anonymous to save any blushes. So the final feature that I really want to highlight, and we're really proud of this one, is the ability to show you, all our customers, where the data is actually going. It's important now that in the GDPR, PII cannot be processed outside of the European Union. And process is a very vague word. So it basically means data can't go anywhere, or PII can't go anywhere. Okay, so if there are any questions in the chat, we will have a look at those. But I want you to go away and even if you just remember one of these, it is find out in your organization, is the starting point to know your Martech stack. And we're in a space right now where no one really feels confident that they've got the skills to do this. No one really even feels confident that they know who else's job it is to do this. So from a cultural perspective, I encourage everyone to take accountability. That's one of the values we have at ObservePoint, taking accountability. And if you see a problem that needs to be resolved, go and talk to people about it, raise the profile. Because assuming it's someone else's role when it's a brand new problem, it's a missed opportunity potentially for yourselves, but it's also definitely a gap that needs to be covered. So yeah, thank you very much. That really
wonderful. Thank you.
To the end.
Yes, we do indeed have a couple of questions. Let me start with where do you find in most organizations, where does this responsibility sit? Who is usually responsible when you go into a company?
Yeah, so typically it's I would say it's the marketing team. They are the first people to get attacked by this because it's marketing's fault. The IT team get involved because they're the only ones that know anything about cookies. The digital marketing analytics team get involved because they're the ones that set up the tags. The legal team gets involved because it's law. And then they scrambling around searching for a CDO or a CRO. So all those teams and job titles I've just kind of dropped need to work together and assign a clear owner.
So the answer is nobody's truly, it doesn't sit on anybody's desk. It belongs to everybody.
Boils up to the CEO and the shareholders.
Yeah.
It's their problem.
With GDPR being sort of the first shot across the bow, one assumes that the European Union is ahead of the game, especially because US, we're with the concept of privacy. What about the implementation side? Do you find that Europe is implementing and better than the US?
Definitely earlier. As you said, we're basically 3 years ahead of you in the curve. But what I would say is even today, 3 years after the implementation, the legal deadline for GDPR, most companies are not GDPR compliant. There is a lot of fines out there just waiting to be sent. And the various commissions and authorities, they will be looking for large organizations to make an example of. So if I were to use this hindsight and advise your audience, who I believe are mostly US based, I would recommend that you get ahead of the curve and start investigating and preparing those investments now, rather than waiting for a federal regulation to come in.
Yeah. Wonderful, Mike. Thank you so much. Our thanks to you. And Hedwig is the name of the owl behind you. Yes.
Hedwig. Thank you. Well, going to learn something every day.
Excellent, Mike. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is time for the breakout. You get to decide between the people and process track. I'm going to host Mohammed Lassoud, who's going to be talking about prioritizing customer centricity. And on the tech track, we have Doug Hall talking about ethical and efficient consent management. And we're going to start as soon as you go back and click on the appropriate link. I will see you over in the people and process track.